Davy Crockett, the heart of the frontier, the soul of America. There are people who were not born to live quiet lives. They are born amidst wild lands and stormy skies, to grow up with the wind, the thunder, and one day step out into the world with an unyielding heart and carve their names into history. Among thousands of tales about the American West, where every footstep was a battle for survival, one name continues to echo with admiration and a tinge of sorrow: Davy Crockett. He was no king, no general. He was an ordinary man who rose from an illiterate boy in the borderlands to a congressman and ultimately fell on the walls of the Alamo for the cause of liberty. Davy wore no armor. His weapon was courage. When nature challenged, he walked straight into the forest. When politics lied, he stood up and spoke the truth. And when freedom was threatened, he did not back down. This is not just a story about one man. It is the spirit of an entire people rising amidst the wild. A nation not yet drawn on the map, but already full of souls who knew how to stand tall in the storm. Chapter 1: The Boy Who Breathed the Wild Woods. Imagine, the year is 1786. In a rugged patch of land in western Tennessee, where stones and thick forests still rule. Winter wind cuts like blades, and fog drapes the hills. In a small wooden cabin hastily built by a creek, a baby is born to the howls of the wind and the bark of dogs echoing in the night. His name, David Crockett, but the world will come to know him by a shorter name, Davy. His father, John Crockett, was a blacksmith and a fur trapper. His mother, Rebecca, was a strong woman, with calloused hands from firewood and sweet potatoes. They were poor. Meals were thin gruel and strips of dried meat. But they had something richer than gold: resilience. From the time he could crawl, Davy knew the smell of smoke, the sound of axes, and the thunder of gunshots deep in the woods. By 5, he could set squirrel traps. By 8, he followed his father through forests, building shelters, hunting deer, and reading the trails of animals like open books. No school, no books. But Davy learned the most vital lesson of all: to survive not by luck, but with sharp eyes and a fearless heart. One autumn morning his father handed him over to a stranger, a cattle herder, bound for Virginia. Halfway through the journey, the man changed his mind and abandoned Davy in a distant town. He was 12. No money, no map, no one to call his own. But Davy Crockett did not cry. That boy walked over 100 miles alone, through thick forests, dodging wild beasts, begging for food, and finally found his way back home. His father thought him lost. His mother had cried her tears dry. But when they saw that skinny boy walk out of the woods, they knew. This child would never kneel to anything life threw at him. From that moment on, Davy wasn't just the son of John and Rebecca. He was the son of the wild, of nature, of a frontier yet to be named. Can you feel the spirit of a young legend rising from the forest? If your heart stirred at the sight of little Davy facing the wild, hit like to fuel this journey forward. Don't forget to subscribe and share this story, because this legend is only just beginning. Chapter 2: The Unbeatable Frontier Hunter. The forests of Tennessee in the early 19th century were no place for the weak. Black bears, gray wolves, venomous snakes, and even bands of robbers lurked in the deep woods, waiting to strike at every unwary settler. And yet, in that dangerous land, there walked a young man not even in his 20s. Flintlock rifle slung across his back, raccoon skin cap on his head, hunting knife in hand, striding through the wilderness as if he owned it. Each of his steps whispered a silent message to the wild. I do not fear you. That young man was Davy Crockett. The boy from the woods had grown tall and strong, with a fire in his eyes that lit up the darkest forest. He wasn't classically educated, didn't know many letters, but he understood every breath of the wilderness. Davy could hear a deer's hoof from 100 paces away. He could call pheasants from the trees, mislead pursuers with false trails, and bring down a bear with a single shot. One misty morning, Davy set out with his loyal hunting dog, named Death, toward a mountain area no one dared enter. Locals called it Bear's Throat, for 3 hunters had vanished there in the past year without a trace. Most folks stayed far away, but not Davy. He entered the forest as quietly as a falling leaf. Only the rustling of Death's paws and the whisper of the wind through ancient trees followed him. Suddenly, from the underbrush, a massive bear lunged out. Its body was as big as a bull, eyes glowing red, fur dark as the night. It roared, and the whole forest seemed to shake. Davy didn't flinch. He dropped to one knee, aimed his rifle, held his breath, and fired. The shot cracked like thunder. The bear stumbled, but roared again and charged. No time to reload. Davy drew his knife, spun aside to dodge the beast's claws, then dove forward and struck straight into its chest. It was a silent war, between man and nature, between instinct and bravery. When it was over, Davy stood, sweat and blood soaking his shirt, but his eyes calm and clear. The bear lay beside him, unmoving. From that day on, people called him Davy, the man who never lost to the wild. Soon, Davy's name spread across the southern United States. People spoke of him like a living legend. He once hunted 3 deer in a single afternoon. He survived 3 days in a tree, living only on rainwater and dried meat. They say he faced a mountain lion with bare hands and won. Of course, some tales were exaggerated, but what mattered more was this: people believed in him. In a time when death could come at any moment, they needed a symbol of strength. Someone not just powerful but kind-hearted too. Davy didn't hunt for pleasure. He only took what he needed, and often gave away the rest to poor families. Behind his sharp gaze was a gentle heart for orphans and widows left behind by the merciless woods. And from those same mountains, Davy began to realize something deeper. Fighting wild beasts is simple, but fighting injustice in society, that's the real battle. A new seed had begun to grow in the heart of this hunter, a seed that would lead him from the wilderness into the halls of politics. If you feel the heroic blood flowing in Davy Crockett's veins, not because he was stronger than the wild, but because he never ran, then hit that like button to spread his spirit. Subscribe and share this video to follow Davy on his next journey, where the forest fades behind and a new world opens ahead, the political stage of America. Chapter 3: From the Wilderness to the Legislature. When a man who once wrestled bears, slept in treetops, and shared his last piece of meat with the poor, stands before a wooden podium in a chamber filled with gentlemen in tailored suits, he will either be laughed at, or he will shake the room to its core. And Davy Crockett chose the latter. As time passed, the Tennessee frontier was no longer untouched wilderness. Settlers poured in, cabins sprang up by the creeks, and with them came land grabs, crushing taxes, and laws that always favored the wealthy. Davy, a man born of dirt and gunpowder, could not stay silent. He began to speak out. At first, it was just conversations by the campfire. Then, speeches in village squares. And soon word spread. Davy understands us. He doesn't give speeches, he tells our stories. He's not just hunting wild beasts, he's hunting injustice. And so, in 1821, the wild woodsman stepped into a new world. He ran for the Tennessee State House of Representatives. People laughed. A backwoods man with no formal education, going up against seasoned lawyers and wealthy landowners? But they forgot one thing. Davy had survived the wilderness. Words couldn't kill him. On his first day of campaigning, Davy stood on a wooden crate. He wore a rough shirt, deerskin trousers, and boots caked with forest mud. The gentleman eyed him like a joke. But then he spoke, not from a script, not in Latin, and not with fancy words. My name is Davy Crockett. I won't promise to get everything right. But I do promise, I won't let the poor be crushed by those who've never known hunger. The chamber fell silent. He spoke of a man who lost an arm defending his homestead, of a mother with 3 children and no rice left for the week. He spoke from the heart, and hearts across the crowd began to stir. The result? Davy won. Not just won. He won in a landslide. In the State House, Davy didn't change. He still wore his coonskin cap, still stomped around in his tall boots, and still kept his flintlock rifle hung on his office wall. But what set him apart wasn't his outfit, it was his conscience. Davy opposed laws that forced the poor to sell their land. He fought against absurd taxes laid upon farmers. And he delivered one line that made powerful men uneasy. "I never bowed to the deep woods, and I sure won't bow to the weight of your gold." Letters began pouring in from across the state. People called him the Wildwoods Congressman, the Shadow of Justice, and one letter even read, "Mr. Crockett doesn't speak eloquently, but he lives truthfully." It was this authenticity that led to his nomination for the United States Congress, where the most powerful voices in America converged. But if the forest had bears, Congress had more cunning beasts. They didn't roar, they didn't slash, but struck with signatures and smiled while choking men with laws. And Davy had just entered the greatest battle of his life. From the mountains to the legislature, Davy Crockett never lost himself. If you believe that justice doesn't need a suit to be respected, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel and share this video to join us in Chapter 4, The Man Who Stood Against the President, where Davy faces the highest power in the land, willing to risk everything, his career, his name, for what he believed was right. Chapter 4. The Man Who Stood Against the President. Some battles aren't fought with bullets, but with ballots and words sharp as knives. Some enemies don't lurk in the shadows, but sit proudly in the president's chair. And some men, like Davy Crockett, are willing to risk everything to stand for what's right. In 1827, Davy Crockett officially entered the United States Congress. A hunter in coonskin cap and worn boots, representing Tennessee among men in tailored suits, speaking as if preaching scripture. Everyone assumed Davy would bow to power, but they forgot. Davy only bows when picking up a fallen friend in the woods. Before injustice, he stands tall. At the time, Andrew Jackson, also from Tennessee, was President of the United States. Strong, determined, and uncompromising. Jackson planned to expand the U.S. westward, which meant driving Native Americans off their ancestral lands into reservations, as dry and lifeless as mass graves. That plan came in the form of the Indian Removal Act. Most Democratic congressmen supported it, afraid to defy the president. Only one man dared to rise. Only one man dared to say, "No." That man was Davy Crockett. In Congress, Davy stood tall, coonskin cap in hand, looking each member in the eye. His voice firm and clear. "I cannot, in good conscience and honor, support a law that takes others' land to give to ourselves. You call them savages. But they are people too, who love their homeland, their children, just like we do." The room fell silent. One clap, then another, then the back rows stood to applaud him. But they were not the ones in power, and the law passed. Davy knew he had just dug a grave for his political career. President Jackson said nothing, but donors withdrew. Allies disappeared. Pro-government newspapers called him the traitor of Tennessee. And the next year, Davy lost re-election. Yet strangely, among the people, he became even more beloved. Native communities, poor settlers, farmers, they saw him as a true hero. Some carved his name into their rifles. Others named their sons Davy. One letter from Kentucky read, "You may no longer be our congressman, but you'll always be our voice." Davy didn't mourn. In his journal he wrote, "I'd rather lose for speaking the truth than win by silencing my conscience." He didn't go home, didn't fade away. His heart still burned, and this time, the fire would lead him to a real battlefield. A distant, brutal place, immortalized in legend. A small fort called the Alamo, where Davy Crockett's fate would become one with the soul of America. When the whole world bowed, Davy Crockett chose to stand. If you too believe that justice needs no permission to speak, hit like. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video to join us in Chapter 5. The final battle, the Alamo, where Davy writes the last epic song of his life. Chapter 5. The final battle, the Alamo. After leaving Congress, Davy Crockett wrote in his journal, "If Congress doesn't need me, then by God, I'll go where people do need me, to fight for freedom." And people did need him. Far out west, Texas was rising up against Mexican rule. American settlers and native Tejano stood together, demanding independence. But they were outnumbered, poorly armed, facing the powerful Mexican army, cannons, cavalry, and a fearsome general, Santa Anna. When Davy heard that Texas needed warriors, he didn't hesitate. At 50 years old, with silver in his beard, the fire in his eyes still burned bright. "I didn't come to Texas to plow fields. I came to carry a rifle." And so, the legend of the East rode west, armed with his long rifle, hunting knife, coonskin cap, and a fearless heart. Upon arrival, Davy joined a band of volunteers stationed at a small fort called the Alamo, in the heart of San Antonio. The old stone walls were crumbling. Inside, just over 180 defenders. Outside, more than 1,800 Mexican soldiers. 1 against 10. No reinforcements. No escape. Only an unbreakable will. Davy looked at the young men around him. Some barely 20, some newly married, some holding a gun for the first time. He didn't give a speech. He simply said, "We don't have to die to be remembered. But if we do die, let's make it worth remembering." February 23, 1836, the Mexican army surrounded the Alamo. Night fell. Cannons roared. Bullets rained like a storm. A blood-red flag was raised, the signal, no mercy. Davy wasn't afraid. He climbed the walls, picked off soldiers with calm precision. They say his rifle echoed through the night, steady as the heartbeat of a warrior who would never fall. Day 3, the walls cracked. Day 5, gunpowder ran out. Day 13, the final assault began. And the last battle began. There are many legends about how Davy Crockett died. Some say he fell in the trenches, surrounded by 16 dead Mexican soldiers. Others say he was captured alive, still standing, eyes fierce, and shouted at General Santa Anna, "Kill me, and you'll never kill freedom." Whatever the truth, Davy didn't run. He didn't surrender. And when the Alamo fell, he became immortal. His death, and that of 180 brave men, awakened a sleeping nation. Remember the Alamo became the battle cry that led to Texas victory, and the birth of the Republic of Texas. Davy never lived to see that triumph, but his name, Davy Crockett, rose beyond the pages of history, becoming the unyielding spirit of America. Davy Crockett didn't choose to live long. He chose to live with purpose. If this story lit a fire in your heart, hit like. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the final chapter, where we reflect on the legacy of a simple man who became immortal. And don't forget to share the video, so the spirit of the Alamo never fades. Chapter 6, Legacy and Legend. Some people die and are forgotten, but there are others, like Davy Crockett, who, when they fall, become legends. After the fall of the Alamo, the bodies of the fallen were found and burned on a funeral pyre. No one knows for certain which remains were Davy Crockett's. But by then it no longer mattered, for his body may have turned to ashes, but his spirit lives on in the hearts of millions of Americans. Remember the Alamo. That vow did more than guide the rebels to victory. It became a warning to a nation. Freedom doesn't come from negotiation tables. It is forged in blood, in bone, in the will of those who dare to stand, even when they know they'll lose. Davy Crockett, a backwoods boy with little formal schooling. A hunter who lived among the trees with a rifle and an axe. A warrior who stood in Congress and spoke the truth. An old soldier who marched to a battlefield no one ordered him to. And finally, a symbol of courage, kindness, and an unbreakable spirit. Americans across the country built statues in his honor. His name was given to a city, Crockett, Texas. Schools, warships, theaters, all proudly bear his name. In the 1950s, children wore coonskin caps and played Davy at the Alamo. On TV, in comics, in films, his image lived on, as vivid as ever. But perhaps the greatest legacy he left wasn't carved in stone or captured on screen, or printed in textbooks. It lives in every ordinary person who chooses to do the right thing, even when it's hard. In those who dare to say no in a world full of lies. In those who stand up even when they know they might lose. Once someone asked Davy, "Are you afraid of death?" He just smiled. "I'm not afraid to die. I'm only afraid of living a life not worth telling about." And he lived a life that America never stops telling. Davy Crockett, child of the wilderness, soldier of freedom, and the burning flame in America's heart. If you believe this story deserves to be shared, hit like as a sign of respect. Subscribe to the channel to follow more epic tales of real-life heroes. And share this video, so the spirit of Crockett never fades from our world.